Fiscal Matters, a podcast of the Financial and Fiscal
Welcome
Commission.
to Fiscal Matters, a podcast of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. In this podcast, we simplify financial matters, we simplify fiscal matters for you at home so you can be able to understand our budgeting system in South Africa. As we celebrate 30 years of our constitutional democracy, we also look at our trajectory in terms of how sustainable has our finances been in the past 30 years. And as a Fiscal Commission, we are one of the key institutions that are supposed to advise government on how to divide the finances of the country between national government, provincial government, and local government. As the Financial and Fiscal Commission, we also present our recommendations to the provincial government, which is the provincial parliaments, or what we call the provincial legislatures. These are very important structures where they make laws that affect you at home. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by a member of the provincial legislature of the Western Cape. I have Honourable Nomi Nkondlo, who's going to now discuss a few issues with us pertaining to budgeting and pertaining to provincial government. Welcome so much, Honourable Nkondlo, to Fiscal Matters.
Welcome, Doc, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. The Fiscal Commission, Honourable Nkondlo, has been to the committee quite a few times. We have come before you as part of the committee, the budget committee, and we have discussed some of our recommendations. What has been your take on some of the recommendations of the FFC in terms of how relevant they are? Are they understandable? The recommendations, are they pertinent in this day and age?
I think, firstly, I would like to appreciate the work of the Commission. I think as a member of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, I think you have enabled us, firstly, to understand the division of revenue that comes from National Treasury much more better, because what you have done for us in most of the occasions is to actually start unpacking that budget and what it means. But the second aspect is also the critique that you provide to the budget, which actually shows us some of the areas that could have been improved, some of the choices of how our resources are allocated, where we could have done better. And that is done by the Commission with the presentations that have been made to us with data, because there's a lot of research. One of the things that, one has been overwhelmed with the work of the Fiscal Commission is actually the in-depth research and the data that actually provides some of the considerations that get to be your recommendations. So I remember even in the time of the professor who was the chair of the Fiscal Commission, may his soul rest in peace. We used to have very robust conversation, particularly on the matters of equitable share, where sometimes some of our committee members would have felt that the problem lies in the equitable share. And he would raise it very clear to us that is a matter that is within our own purview as the legislatures, first and foremost, but secondly, the rationale of the provincial equitable share, the formula itself, that actually when it was decided in the South African context, it took into consideration the the concept of leveling the playing fields.
Yes.
Because South Africa comes from a history of a divided past that brought, an uneven development. So you can't believe that people are equal. And when you distribute resources, you distribute them equally. You actually use equitable distribution, which take into cognizance that if somebody in Khayelitsha, their needs are more than those that are in Constantia, you must take that into consideration when you are allocating resources. So I just want to demonstrate that point, that we've had very robust conversations with the Commission. But also the relevance, as you asked, Doc. You have been very relevant. From the time of the COVID-19, when the government had to, make decisions, about a budget, where I think the Fiscal Commission would, still raise some of the developmental imperatives that must not be lost as the state is dealing with an emergency, and also understanding that this emergency also is amplifying some of the structural problems that have been there in the South African economy. And therefore, when we respond, we must not only be reacting to the COVID challenge and the health realities that it provides to us, but we must understand the sustainability of our interventions, so that even if another pandemic were to hit us, we must as a country be able. So personally, I have learned a lot. As a member, it has helped me, to be better in my work, in serving, in the portfolio of finance and the portfolio of budgeting. So I must say, I continue to appreciate the wisdom of those who said in our constitution there shall be a fiscal commission that helps the state to look at the decision that it makes on fiscal matters.
Absolutely. You spoke very well.
Decision that it makes on fiscal matters.
Absolutely. You spoke very well about the equitable share and how the FFC has had an impact on that and the thinking behind it. You will remember as well, Honourable Member, that there was a white paper on local government, which was also it informed the thinking with regards to the equitable share in terms of how much should go to local government, how much should be allocated to the provinces and at national. There were assumptions which were made then to say that local government will be the cold face of service delivery, but they will be able as well to get more money or more funds to supplement the transfer from the local communities. 30 years down the line, has that actually happened? So the assumptions that were in the white paper on local government, which actually said local government is going to get a smaller share because they will be able to get levies or rates and taxes from the public in the communities that live there. Has that really happened given the state of our economy and the state of poverty in the country, in your view?
Look, those particular assumptions, I think contextually at the time would have been correct to assume that a local government sphere draws, revenue from the people through rates, through companies that operates, at a municipal level, So those assumptions would have been correct. And to assume that you would then, if those municipalities, have got systems in place, have got a proper capacity in terms of their administrative level, and also they've got the integrity in terms of their leadership with vision to ensure, that things work. So that assumption would have been correct. But what has happened over time? What has happened over time is we implement democracy. there are things that must be considered, because one of the aspects of that assumption, Doc, as you had just said, is that local government is closer to the people, is at the coalface, and that is a reality. Now, with that reality comes responsibility. And now this sphere we see actually as a sphere that has even more responsibility than the other spheres, because of the fact that it is actually where the people are. Because when people are frustrated about services, they don't ask, whether this particular policy, which the custodian of the policy is a national department, they ask a local government official or a local government politician. So it is important to understand that as the democracy of South Africa 30 years down the line, has been experienced, we need to take lessons of what has happened in as far as lived experiences of the people, but also of the institutions of the state. And I'm saying we also have COVID. What has COVID done? COVID closed the economy. And now it then says that assumption of a municipality that must draw revenue from its citizens, local citizens, through rates and taxes, those citizens could not get to jobs. Majority of them ended up losing jobs. There is data and evidence to that effect. So it means now the pool that from which the municipality would have drawn this revenue, if, as an example, we say the municipality would, a particular municipality had about 1,000 working people, which it draws rates and taxes of R1 million. If out of that 1,000 people now, almost 300, lost their jobs, it means then the revenue, there is a cut in that particular revenue. The municipality is no longer drawing the R1 million, it's drawing far less. But then it doesn't mean the services from which the municipality needs to deliver have reduced. So you see now the mismatch. Now the municipality is sitting with the burden of service delivery that has not reduced, but the revenue on the other side have reduced. So what are then the additional resources or sources of income that the municipality must draw on? So this is why post-COVID we need to be thinking from a fiscal point of view, what are other sources that must be brought into the mix for the municipality to consider. So the reality of the matter is that assumption, I'm saying contextually at the time, would have made sense, but now 30 years later, with things that have happened, including the likes of the pandemic, but also the like of the realities of this uneven development in South Africa, with the inequality levels. If we talk about the Gini coefficient index that has showed that in South Africa was still at almost 0.6, which is very high. So it means when we talk about these things, they are not high level, they are not abstract, they are lived realities. Because when you talk about inequality, it means, as an example, in the city of Cape Town, yes, when you drive into the city, you are meeting people or a space, a geographic space, which when you look at it, may be operating, far better than when you go to Manenberg, to Khayelitsha, to Nyanga. So the truth of the matter is that the socio-economic conditions in these particular areas are not the same. So you have to then look at variation. That thing of saying you can't have a blanket approach. So I'm just saying, Doc, it has been that learning, because South Africa had to start its own democratic dispensation and had to learn about its own material realities that must influence even its fiscal decisions.
And within that in mind, do you think that the district development model can cure some of these challenges of disparities within municipalities and service delivery, and also more efficiencies in terms of how our people experience government?
Actually, the district development model is a constitutional imperative, because already the constitution spoke about intergovernmental relations framework that the state must develop, because the men and women who were wise, who wrote our constitution, informed by the future South Africa that everybody was yearning for, away from the South Africa that we had, a South Africa that was dividing people. If you understand, that constitution spoke about oneness, but oneness that takes in cognizance the diversity. That diversity in geography, in race of people, in abilities of people, gender and others. Now, from a government point of view, it considered that yes, you will have 3 spheres of government: national, provincial and local government. But it underscores that these should be interconnected and interrelated, because the one citizen of South Africa, which is a South African citizen first, even when they are residing in Cape Town or they are residing in Johannesburg, there should not be a difference, because part of what is also provided for in the constitution is the freedom of movement away from the South Africa that was of boundaries. So it means if I'm a resident of South Africa in Gugulethu and I'm a resident of South Africa in Cape Town, from the service provisioning of the state, there should not be a difference. So the district development model actually is so urgent to try and ensure that the ordinary citizens are not dealt with this frustration that we get when we communicate with them or when we go into public engagements, where people say this thing of being told that no, when I'm asking a question, no, this matter is of national government, no, this matter is of province, no, this matter is a local government issue. They're expecting that the state must operate in unison. Now, the district development model, what it does, it says, let's as government understand the problem, so that when I'm in national, I understand what is my role into this particular problem as a province and as local government, so that when we come together, we work in an integrated manner. I mean, we would have remember from the time of Tatu Nelson Mandela, from President Mbeki and all other presidents, we have always been hearing them talking about an integrated government, working in an integrated manner. So the district development model is actually now putting that in practice and putting an institutional framework to do exactly that. So that if I have a problem in Manenberg of a clinic or in Mandlenkosi in Beaufort West, I'm able to say, if this problem, somebody says, no, this particular clinic is under the provincial government, there should not be an issue, to resolve that problem. Somebody must be able to say, yes, I am here, I'm coming from local government, but I know I'll go back to the district development model platform and be able to tell them that, look, a provincial partner of mine, of the Department of Health, in your clinic that is situated in Mandlenkosi as an area, there is this particular problem, so that it doesn't take months and years to resolve problems.
Absolutely. Finally, recently the Provincial Minister of Finance presented her budget. The budget has been touted as a budget in favor of the poor. The largest spending in this budget has been claimed that it's going to benefit the poor people of the Western Cape. What is your understanding? Do you feel the same, or have you had a look at the budget? What is your take on it?
Look, we appreciate the language that the budget is pro-poor, because that is what it's supposed to be in any way. So to make the claim, for me, is not enough, because I think this is an issue that sitting in the official opposition benches from the start of this administration, we've been raising, that here is the Western Cape, Cape Town in particular, having a glaring inequality. And this is not unique to the province. You can find it in the South Africa that we are. And we understand it from our historic past. But as the politicians of to date, our assignment from day one in 1994, when people voted for a democratic dispensation, they voted for men and women who must be preoccupied by correcting that status quo. It's in the constitution, called redress the imbalances. So when somebody comes and says we're doing a pro-poor budget, they are actually operating within the mandate of voters from 1994. Actually, we must know that our time is ticking to still be talking about that language even in 2024. Something must give. So we're saying we appreciate the fact that the MEC would say they're doing a pro-poor budget only now, because this is exactly as they were getting into this government. You know, they were supposed in 2019 to have implemented a pro-poor budget, so that as they end the administration, they're not only now talking about a pro-poor budget. Actually, they are supposed now to be giving a report, an account of how they've dealt with the poverty in this particular province. One question to our leader of opposition were asking, in 2019, Stats SA published a report on the state of inequality. Part of that, I think one of the index was looking at income inequality, and the city of Cape Town had a serious stark reality of income inequality, which actually links to asset poverty. Because if you do not have proper incomes, it's one thing for people to get jobs, which actually is what this budget talks about. You know, there is a launch of a strategy called Growth for Jobs, and our critic once again was to only talk about this as you exit the administration. The question is, where have you been, you know, to talk about growth for jobs? But also we're talking about meaningful and decent jobs, because it's one thing for people to be in jobs, it's another in the city of Cape Town where the cost of living is very high. Because if they are not earning proper incomes, the reality of the matter is that you're not dealing with inequality. So people are just going to be going to work, but the money that they are earning cannot buy them anything. They can't even have assets on their name. So wealth distribution once again is not even affected. So the truth of the matter in the budget, our critique is exactly that. Actually, the critique further goes to the fact that after you spoke about the pro-poor budget, is your programming also pro-poor, or you keep people in what I term keep busy programs? You know, you get people into EPWP, but EPWP in its conception was supposed to help people who are highly unskilled so that they are able to acquire skills, and therefore they must graduate. The problem that we're seeing is that there's a revolving door. People are kept into the EPWP, they are not graduating. So that is why poverty is not affected. Yes, money gets to be used, you know, and poverty in South Africa was budget. It is there, and it is said it's a pro-poor budget, but the outcomes of this pro-poor budget says much to be desired, because when all is said and done, the input of the pro-poor budget does not match the outcomes, because the outcomes should be what? It should be a difference in the household. Actually, that person was put in an EPWP program. If at the end of the day, after a year or 6 months, that person is not in a better job or is not in the mainstream economy, cannot take care of his or her own family, then it meant that that EPWP project and the money that was spent into that particular program has gone to waste. So I'm saying it's one thing to talk. Let's not use this terminology of actually abusing the term pro-poor. We must be truthful to it, because we must ensure that even our programs are actually taking people from one level to the other through our programs. Then we must see in the evidence that FFC is producing, because FFC is going to come back in the next budget, is going to come back and be able to tell us that indeed the billions that the MEC was speaking about that were put into the pro-poor budget, how many people were actually rescued out of poverty through that budget. Numbers do not lie, and we sit and await. We appreciate that the MEC speaks about the pro-poor, but we're saying the tasting, the taste of the pudding is in the eating.
Absolutely. And indeed, the FFC will come back with those analysis. Finally, I'm tempted with one more question, Honourable Nkondlo. Now Parliament is coming to a recess. Members are going to go to their constituencies. We are celebrating 30 years of our democracy. the 6th Parliament has coming to an end. We're going to the 7th Parliament. In your view, as you are going to go now to those communities, the question is, has the promise of our democracy materialized for many people? So when you are going to many voters who are looking up to you to give them hope, constitutional democracy 30 years down the line, has it lived up to its promise? Have the lives of the people 30 years later, since we are celebrating 30 years of democracy, have there been a material change in their lives, in your view?
I would say, without mincing my words, as somebody who grew up, who was born during the apartheid years, and who has lived now also in the democratic dispensation, that at any point, waking up at any time, I will vote for a democratic South Africa. I'll vote for a democratic South Africa because the children that I have personally, that are born in the democratic dispensation, didn't have to go through what I had to go through as a young person, as a child growing up in an apartheid era. But one thing I must say is that democracy and its journey is no event. One thing that we have learned 30 years later is that it is no event. More so, it requires all hands on deck. Similar to what many South Africans would have done in the fight against that system of apartheid that South Africans said we no longer want to live under this system. So all of them, they pulled up their sleeves and they say we shall work for a different dispensation, which is a democratic dispensation. One of the things we have seen, and as a person who is in the public space and go into many communities, is that I normally invite ordinary citizens in South Africa that you must follow your vote. One of the things we find in countries where democracy works, it is when voters follow their vote. How do you follow your vote? You become active the same way people were active to remove the apartheid state and apartheid system. It's exactly the same with democracy, because how do you ensure that your views, your voice, which democracy allows you to have, gets to be known, gets to be sustained and influencing the others? Is you participating in the democratic dispensation. 2 is awareness, is educating yourself about matters of the democracy, matters of the state. And I'm very much happy to be in this podcast of the Fiscal Commission, because one of the things that we found is that our people, when it comes to matters of budget, fiscal matters, as you say, people do not necessarily, get interested to participate in those kind of issues. And this is where the matters are at, because after you have said we need schools, after you've said we need a job, after you have said we need clinics, rands and cents must be put in that. So when the president says to you, we've put this number of billions into health, you must ask, what does that mean? Right into my community, because sometimes it may say billions into health, but it's actually meaning building clinics in another province. It's not talking about your province. But if you are not engaging with what is entailed and you understand how budgeting gets to be done, and also you participate, because the beauty about our constitution, no decision can be done by the state without public participation. So I invite in your podcast, as a member of parliament, as we conclude also our own term, I invite, even at this hour, that to date, starting from yesterday, this week, from the budget speech of the MEC in the province, there has already been committees, Committee of Health, Committee of Social Development, Education. They are unpacking what it means what the MEC was saying about a pro-poor. So we must go and test her words. When she was saying pro-poor, we must go and ask, where is the budget of the Manenberg Hospital, JF Jooste, that the province more than 10 years, have put down? Where is that? Because that is where we're going to test her pro-poor. When she speak about pro-poor budget, you must go into the Education Standing Committee, because that is where we're going to know exactly how much that money, when she was talking billions of rands, now the billions gets to be allocated in each department. So you must then ask, the fencing of the schools in Strand, in Nomzamo, Lwandle, in Rastov, is the money of fencing included there under infrastructure? When you talk about a human settlement, you must go and ask in the standing committee. I am also in the standing committee of economic development. Township businesses, they always ask me this question. We do not have places to operate. Actually, during a public hearing, we were in George the other day. I had people there asking about spaces to operate their businesses. In Veldrift, women that are trading, they were complaining about spaces to operate. People must come to the standing committee. It is actually virtual, so you can link in anywhere you are, in Mandla Nkosi, in Beaufort West. You can link in and ask that I am here in Beaufort West and we do not have places to trade, and yet MEC spoke about a pro-poor budget. In tourism, I'm running my tourism business in Khayelitsha, in Rands. Where is tourism safety for our own customers that are here? So these are the questions that we are inviting people to join this, so that even before FFC does their research, the actual citizens must go and test what MEC was saying about a pro-poor budget in these standing committees, so that by the time we all go on the 29th of May to vote, we must know exactly what are we voting for. We are voting for people who do not only speak about our issues, but they act on them.
Well, there you have it. There you have it from Honourable Nomi Nkondlo, who is a member of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature. Very clear. Follow your vote. Be aware about what is happening in the local government and provincial government sphere. Interrogate the budget. Understand what the budget means for you. Finally, she has said, vote for a democratic South Africa. See you at the polls. Thank you so much.